Here we go, 365 Sports, about halfway through the 4 o'clock hour. Jayna Bardahl, college sports editor, newsletter writer, theathletic.com, and also has been around covering college sports for quite some time, joins us on 365 Sports with Craig and Paul, and I'm David Smoke. Jayna, thank you very much for your time, as always. So I saw your newsletter. Oregon and Ohio State take front and center. Your thoughts about the Ducks, and how about the big floating duck in the river right outside Indianapolis as far as the stadium?
Well, hey guys, thanks for having me. Yeah, that was quite the entrance by Oregon. I enjoyed seeing that on my Twitter timeline this morning. But yeah, I mean, Big Ten Media Days starts up today. I think the spotlight really is on Ohio State and Oregon. I think that those two teams are heavy favorites to play in the Big Ten championship game. A lot of people are considering them heavy favorites, even locks for the 12-team college football playoff. Obviously, with Ohio State, they've had an offseason that has just been really historic. Just building a roster that's built for this must-win season, especially for Coach Ryan Day, and really, they're on the verge of a year where they have a lot of expectations around them. Also have their new OC in Chip Kelly. It was interesting. I just saw clips of Ryan Day earlier on at the podium saying he trusts Chip Kelly with his life, and there's a lot of trust there. So there's lots of intrigue about Ohio State. Then on the other hand, Oregon is obviously one of the four newcomers in the conference, but I think the Ducks carry very high expectations as well. Dylan Gabriel as a quarterback is a heavy favorite for Offensive Player of the Year. He's already up high on Heisman Trophy odds. So those are the two teams that I think people expect a lot of. So they'll have the heavy spotlight this week in Indianapolis as well.
Who do you think has more pressure on them this year? Ryan Day to A, beat Michigan, and B, run deep into the playoff, or say like a Lincoln Riley who's had a couple of down years and now enters a new conference for the first time without a surefire superstar quarterback?
That's a really good question. I think initially, I would say Ryan Day and Ohio State, because I think, like I said earlier, I think they've built this roster to really have these high expectations. I think USC and Lincoln Riley still have a lot of question marks around them, and people are obviously pretty angsty to start seeing things work with Riley, especially on the defensive side of the ball with USC. But I think there's a lot more question marks for the Trojans, whereas if you look at Ohio State and Ryan Day, everyone just feels really confident in what they've built. So it would feel like a pretty big letdown to see it not carry out onto the field this season.
Okay, Jayna, you know that the realignment world has been crazy over the last couple of years, so here we are with this 18-team Big Ten. I've asked just about everybody throughout our preseason talks about this, but at what point did you just not know what to do with your preseason poll when you got to a certain number of teams, or did you enjoy the 18 teams? I myself find it to be quite a lot to keep up with, but how about you?
Yeah, it is a lot to keep up with. It's going to be an interesting season. We also, the divisions are gone in the Big Ten,
yep.
so that's going to be another thing to get used to, and especially once we get down to the conference championship game, it's going to be decided in a different way. But yeah, the 18 teams is pretty crazy. I mean, Tony Petitti said this morning that Big Ten is focused on those 18 right now and integrating these four new teams in there. So, I think you still have those traditional heavyweights at the top of the Big Ten. Ohio State, Oregon is in there now, Michigan. I think this mid-tier will be interesting to watch this year, and seeing if teams that have traditionally not been able to maybe break through that wall, like maybe Penn State or Iowa, are able to do that.
There's teams in the middle. I saw a note, I believe it was from Brett McMurphy, about Rutgers. Their schedule, conference schedule, avoids like the top 5 or 6 rated teams in the conference, which is just one of those algorithms. And Greg Schiano, this is Rutgers. People have always made fun of them, at least the last 6 to 10 or 12 years. How much does he impact Rutgers? And I'm not saying they're going to play for a conference title, but they get a break with the schedule, and they're making some inroads right now.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I noticed that on their schedule as well. I think they don't play Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, or Oregon. And I also saw Greg Schiano this morning kind of went viral online saying he didn't come out of retirement to go to a bowl game, came out of retirement to win a championship at Rutgers. So I think that, yeah, given the schedule that Rutgers has, and also some of the returners that they have, I think they have a chance to have a season that is maybe more successful than they've seen in the past, for sure. I mean, that the schedule is the first thing you can look at where it's pretty manageable for them, and if they're able to take advantage of that, they could be fun to watch.
What are reasonable expectations for Michigan?
That's a good question. I'm really interested in Michigan, and I don't know too much about what to expect from them with Sharon Moore now as head coach. I think they're going to have some good momentum, and the roster obviously is familiar with Sharon and likes him as a coach. We saw him head coach in a few games last season as well that ended up being successful on the way to the national championship. So I don't know that Michigan is definitely not a surefire playoff contender this year. I think they'll be successful, but maybe use the year also to just build back up the camaraderie in the roster that they have there. So I think that, expectations are always high at Michigan, but I don't think it's a letdown if they necessarily, miss the 12-team playoff and maybe even miss the Big Ten championship game this year as well.
Jayna, as we discussed, it's a crowded field, but are you buying in on Nebraska, taking it up another notch with Matt Rhule in year 2?
So obviously, there's quarterback Dylan Raiola, and he's going to be interesting to watch. It's a true freshman who really has the weight of this program on his shoulders. He's going to be the starter. Everybody's betting on him kind of saving the program, and he had a whole story leading up to here, committed to Georgia, then flipped back again to Nebraska. So Nebraska's obviously really excited about him. It just depends how a true freshman is going to be able to meet those expectations, and I think that could go either way. I think Matt Rhule's a really good coach as well, but Nebraska has a lot to prove on the field results-wise. The front half of their schedule is pretty forgiving. I think they could get off to a really strong start, but it's avoiding those late game mishaps and giving up those leads really late like they did a lot last season. That's going to be key for them to have a strong start, which I think would be really important given how their schedule plays out in the beginning.
Yeah, you wonder, because of their record in one-score games has been so atrocious for like the last 5 years, if they could win a game early, late in the game with a pick or a score or a field goal or something, it's like they're waiting for the worst thing to happen, like a meteor to land on their head, and it normally does. If they could win a game early, and I know they have Colorado somewhat early, and that's an explosive offensive team. I think if that happens, that might get them those extra 2 or 3 wins for the rest of the year. Yeah,
that Colorado game is going to be one to watch as well, just like it was last year. But this year it's at Memorial Stadium in Nebraska. And, yeah, that'll be an important one for that team. And I'd agree with you. I mean, their outcomes in one-score games can feel really deflating, and I think it did last year. So once again, that's why I think these first 5, maybe 6 weeks of the season are really pivotal, and I think we'll have a better idea of what to think of where Nebraska's season is going to go after those first few weeks.
Purdue was picked last in that Cleveland.com poll, and not that I expected them to be a playoff contender by any means, but I thought Hudson Card, Ryan Walters, all that your 2 would be better than last. Why do you think the absolute doubt on Purdue?
Yeah, I think Purdue has a lot to prove. They have a pretty hard schedule, I would say, too. I'm just looking at it now. They have Notre Dame pretty early. They go to Wisconsin, which is always a tough game on the road. And also curious to see what Luke Fickell will do there this season. Purdue also gets Oregon. They get Ohio State. So I think, I think Hudson Card, maybe people are underrating him a little bit, but I think that for Purdue, it's just a matter of having a lot to prove on the field and playing in a conference that is just is taken a notch up this year in terms of what it's going to take to be successful.
Your thoughts about the Heisman race, which is early, and you see these polls that come out, and Dylan Gabriel, Quinn Ewers, obviously Carson Beck, among others. Do you have one that right now you think, if you were to say, okay, this is the one I think will win it right now?
That's a good question. I think the leaders right now seem to be Dylan Gabriel and Carson Beck. I think those are the two that people kind of are going to have their eyes on early in the season. But I was just reading earlier today, actually, a story from Seth Emerson at The Athletic from last week's SEC Media Days, and there's a lot of really star-powered quarterbacks in the SEC this year as well, which is a little bit of a different storyline than there was last year. I mean, as you mentioned, there's Quinn Ewers, there's Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. So there's a chance for one of those quarterbacks in the SEC to have a really strong campaign as well.
Jayna, what's it like to write that newsletter? Because it's got to be kind of short, crisp, and yet very informative. And I always enjoy those because it's kind of like, in a way, Cliff Notes to understand what's going on in case you've been out for 12 hours.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's always fun to write. I mean, I kind of try to just figure out what I've been reading and following all day, and what I could catch people up on as someone that reads and writes about college football all day, every day, and what my other fans that maybe don't get to do that as often as I do might have missed. So it's definitely a fun project in the off season. Just dialing in on storylines here around media days, but also the quirky things that happen. We had a lot of coverage on the EA Sports College Football 25, which I know people were super excited about. So it was kind of fun to dial into that excitement. But really, the newsletter is going to be focused towards the season now that it's inching a lot closer. We'll have schedule breakdowns. We'll have inside looks at games that are going to matter most for the playoff race. A ton of just playoff predictions because it's the first year of this 12-team format, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see how the teams that are in contention fluctuate throughout the season. So a lot of trending sections, and we'll always keep you up to date on what you need to know, and also what's fun to follow in college football, because there's always some funny stuff going around as well.
Absolutely. Jayna, thanks for your time. We appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate the time on the show. Have a great week, and we'll have you again, I hope, sometime or 2 or 3 during the college football season.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for having me. Have a good day.
Jayna Bardahl, theathletic.com, with us on a lot of the nuggets and her stories, topics, bullet points when it comes